Hi there, Vasco Duarte here, your host. I wanted to share a story with you. You know how sometimes Agile just feels like following another checklist? When processes and frameworks feel more important than what we are trying to achieve, and sometimes even like handcuffs. I was talking to a customer of the Global Agile Summit, and he used a term that I kind of stuck in my mind. He said, "I have agile fatigue." And I've heard that a lot from people since then. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be this way. So we started thinking, and at the Global Agile Summit, which is happening this May, we're bringing together practitioners who've actually done that, who've broken free from this, install the framework kind of mindset. We want to focus the summit on real-life, first-person stories of Agile succeeding that inspire you to action. We're talking real experiences, practical solutions, and of course, amazing insights from leaders like Gojko Adzic, who will be one of the keynote speakers, and Jürgen Apelo, who will be one of the keynote speakers as well. If you're ready to leave the Agile fatigue behind, just join us in Tallinn. The early bird tickets are now available at the globalagilesummit.com. And mark your calendars. We will have workshops on May 18th, that's a Sunday. And then the conference itself will happen on May 19th and 20th of 2025 in Tallinn, Estonia. So let's make Agile exciting again. And remember, go to globalagilesummit.com, that is, and get your early bird ticket now. It will only be available until early March, so grab it now. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday, where we have this week Antti Horelli. Hey, Antti, welcome back.
Hello. Nice to be here on Tuesday again.
Absolutely. And it's Team Tuesday, so we'll talk about a story of a team and how sometimes they create their own problems. But before we dive into that, Antti, share with us, what was the book that most inspired you in your career as a Scrum Master?
That's a really tough one. A lot of good material, a lot of good books out there. But the one I chose is actually not really straight out Scrum, but it is a book called This is Lean, Resolving the Efficiency Paradox. It's by two Swedish professors called Modig and Ostrom, and it's annoyingly, I don't have it here. I usually have it by my desk, but now I've loaned it, so it's in very good use. And it's well written. It's not too big. It's very approachable. And for me, it really helped me kind of crystallize my understanding about what is this flow that we talk about when we talk about flow in Kanban, flow in Scrum, I guess, in a different perspective. What is flow efficiency? And as opposed to resource efficiency. And how do you explain this to someone who isn't a methodology nerd? So this really helped me kind of get to a kind of slightly higher level, especially when we think about how do we enhance the process of product development as a whole, like from idea to proven value. How do you get that thing to flow? How does it make sense for someone to not maybe do the one thing they're really, really good at all the time? Why is that valuable? Even though it feels intuitively very productive to do exactly that.
So what would be like the short description that you would give? Let's say there's Luke, our faithful Scrum Master out there who really needs to explain flow to his team. And he needs some help. So, Antti, let's help him out. Let's help Luke. How would you then describe Luke based on what you learned from, flow to Luke based on what you learned from that book?
Well, first of all, I will pass you the book at some point to Luke. But barring that, I would say that trying to optimize getting one single thing done at a time, even though it doesn't feel that effective, it has these kind of non-intuitive, but once you look at them, very clear benefits. And that is kind of what you are aiming for. So if you can go to completing one thing that creates value to the end user, to the customer, to the business, or the organization internally, whatever it is you're doing, and aim for that. It's tough. It probably doesn't make sense to really in everyday work do exactly that. Have like a whole development team work on just one thing. Sometimes it's just not practical. But aim for that. Maybe do two things, whatever makes sense in your context. That would be, I don't know, my short description.
Yeah, aim to one piece flow.
Yes.
And of course, we'll put the link in the show notes for people to go and check out the book. Now, when we think about teams, though, Antti, shifting gears a little bit now, we think of, a group of people working well together and kind of performing, delivering what needs to be delivered. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes teams create their own problems, and they might be caused by some external factors, but there are also internal factors in the teams that cause problems. I don't know what story you have to share with us, but do share a story of that team. Tell us a little bit about the context and walk us through the steps of how those, little behaviors or practices over time grew and started to become a problem for the team.
Okay, well, in my experience, I guess the kind of number one problem that has deteriorated teams I've worked with has usually been some sort of personal differences, some sort of communication or
So tell us the story of a team. Like where was this conflict happening?
All right. So some years ago, we had a development team. It had a Scrum Master. It had been kind of put together, I guess, a bit more from people who were used to doing solo work. There were some maybe strong personalities there, maybe some different opinions on what is good work, what is good development work, what is good tech work, what is efficiency. And then when these people started working together, there became clashes. The team itself, it was kind of cross-competence, but still somehow not everything was probably there also in the competence area. First things started looking pretty good. People did work, things were happening, but then at some point we kind of realized that things weren't clicking. A lot of work was being done. People were kind of, you could see that people were like doing a lot of work, but still it didn't click into functional code or especially into value for the end user. Things just didn't like come together. And our product owner tried to kind of solve it one way by doing more, maybe a refinement, more better user stories, putting more effort into that. The developers, at least some of them, thought this was maybe more of a tech problem. They went kind of into that area and did a lot of tech refinement, and maybe there were some disagreements there on how to do things. And at some point, I was an agile coach at this point, so I tried to come kind of in and help and try to iron out what's the problem here really. Like people were getting really stressed out because the communication was so bad, the feeling in the team was starting to be really bad, and so on. And I tried to help. We had some other people also try to help. Eventually, we kind of just weren't able to do it, and the team was disbanded. So we didn't really figure out what was the key ingredient that was missing. Maybe it just didn't. Maybe the people were so different that there wasn't the recipe for success. Maybe there was some competence missing still. That's maybe one reason why things weren't coming together, and the team grew frustrated about itself because of this and all that. So yeah, that was kind of
so a lot of hypotheses of what might have happened or could have happened differently. And obviously, we can't solve all the problems we're facing, right? Like sometimes we just have to say, hey, this is not good enough. Let's hit pause, reset, and start again. But if you had the chance of going back and replaying that story, what would you have done differently, Antti?
Tough to say, because I did kind of try some things and they didn't really work, at least not good enough. There was some positive, but not really enough. Maybe I would, when the team first got together, maybe at that point I would try to maybe build a stronger foundation. Maybe try to get some of these possible communication problems or kind of point of view problems to the surface like earlier. Try to get a better mutual understanding about how does this team work, what is our purpose. Okay, that was kind of clear what the purpose was actually, but still, how do we go about doing our thing and all of that. I guess one thing that compounded this whole thing was that the team wasn't co-located, so all communication was pretty much online, or at least most of it, and it was getting these personal issues discussed well online is more difficult. So it probably wouldn't have. I would have brought the team together if that had been possible. It wasn't in this case, but still.
And one of the things, like what you just said, the team was remote, and that made the communication and sorting out personal issues a lot harder. One of the things that is clear is that we can't always affect the geographical context, right? Like sometimes teams are just distributed and there's nothing we can do about it. But when that happens, as Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, we do need to bring that as a core aspect of how the team works. Like, for example, we always know that when there's a conflict, it's much better to talk things out earlier than later, right? Before the conflict escalates. So that's one thing we can try out in a remote setting quite easily. We just book a meeting, right? And even when the time zone differences is a big problem, and sometimes it is, there's still a chance of being able to book a meeting and get people to talk. But there's also other aspects. Sometimes bringing a team together is a good idea, and sometimes splitting a team apart is a good idea, right? Like finding out where are the conflict lines, and can we create two subgroups, for example, that have less conflict within them, and try to remove the conflict through that. And of course, that means more work, right? Like the PO has more work, the architect has more work, or whatever, but it allows the team to function. So I think this aspect of considering remote as a core property of the team is very important, because very often, especially after Corona, we go from co-located to distributed, and we forget that distributed is a totally different type of work than co-located is.
Yeah, and you have to be, more aware of some things. What are maybe the typical problems to react to very, very early when distributed? You have to be kind of more in touch. Some things you can get away with more if you're co-located.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of conflicts that get solved by just having a chat over a coffee in the coffee room that cannot happen. That type of conversation cannot happen in a remote setting unless we make space for it, right? And it's possible to make space for it, but again, more work, but it is possible.
Yeah, that's very true. I agree fully.
Absolutely. Great story. Thank you for sharing that, Antti.
Thank you.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.